Welcome back with Happy Chappy. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm not going to say it's true, but I'm not going to say it's not true because it's half truth, as it's coming from me. Um, it's things that I've learned, things that I've seen, things that I know, and then I'm speculating also by all that I know. So I'm going to just make this as a wee story, and what you're going to find out is things that has been talked about, but not your norm. What I mean is the controlling of the world, aliens, the money system, us as beings, our evolvement, how we've evolved in who we are, the brain, and why. We're going to talk about gold and why that is so important. So first off, there was Earth, and these aliens came to Earth and they found beings like you and I, but not the same. So much like you and I, but when it came to the brain, the frontal lobes of the brain had not evolved. They could not think about oneself, awareness, and sense as we do. They were like beasts, primal. And so the aliens would come to Earth and they would mine for gold. And this took up a lot of their time. And what the gold was an energy source on their planet. Now, Earth was a great source to provide this gold, to provide this energy. And what they found was that because it took up so much time, they needed to find another way to create some kind of animal, beast, to do the slavery work for them. Now, this was only one, say, tribe. There was also another tribe, let's say on the good side. So this tribe that was forming for the gold was are seeing beings like you and I, and thought if we give them consciousness, awareness of oneself, being able to think, then we could manipulate things into a way where they mine the gold for us, while creating illusions for themselves by creation, where we give them that power of that godly power of who they are, of the power that how they can create. And so they give us that power of the frontal lobe, where we could think, where we could create and recreate in our way of thinking, giving us godly consciousness. And so then you had man like you and I, who was able to create fire, create structures, and we would use gold for currency, to exchange for the creations that we were creating. And once there was enough gold mined by these creatures like you and I, beings, and the exchange would stop for using the gold as a currency. And what would happen is they would confiscate the gold and create up a system that would have an exchange of fake currency, like the money you carry today. And in that currency, what would happen is there'd be so much put out there. And they would use coins, paper, so on. But they would have the people to create this. And so while the people done this and kept mining, what was happening was they would take the gold back to their planet. And whatever gold was being mined through this time afterwards would be transmuted through substances, which it came to today is we've got mobile phone. There's not a mobile phone that goes out there that hasn't got a piece of gold in it, a conductor, or any electronic devices. And so what we have is a new currency, an invisible currency, really. We created something with paper and soluble substances that we mine. And in the mining, what is taken away from all that is the gold, where we are in slave labor. And so while we advance and grow in who we are, we start using these materials to create currency through the timber, through the metals. And we use these mining materials for exchange of creations, of structures of different sorts that we create as the creator. But never aware that we are the creator, that we were given that power. Because while being given that power, what would happen is that we would be caught in the illusion of the creations. And so it would give us feeling and draw us to that the creations were giving us feeling, and it wasn't really in who we were as the creator. And so we would go on to mine for these substances while mining for gold. And they would come and they would take the gold, but also distribute it into different devices as time went on in the ages. And so what you got then was a grid, an electronic magnetic field around the earth that they could observe from their planet and see how we were adapting. And this was also another thing that they had planned, was because we were, before they gave us consciousness, beasts in the wild, we were like animals. We didn't have control of our behavior. And so when give consciousness, if they kept this system going, what was the hope was that man would be under control and never gain that consciousness to take control of everything. And And in this way, the beast would never take over and the beast would never destroy the universe. But then you have the other side, the good side, who had hope for man to find that consciousness within him and to understand that he was the creator of all, that he had that power to create all in the consciousness that was given to him. And so one side was, in the good side of the aliens, was hoping that man would come to evolve and it would bring heaven on earth, as is mentioned in the likes of a Bible. And so what would be happening there, if you look back into times of Egypt, was it was royalty. Everything was also around gold. Gold was the source for everything. And so we had the mine for it all the time. It was the power source. But what we were seeing it as the power source, and it was a power source for the aliens. But what we didn't realize is that we had that power source within us, because we had that physical and non-physical side of us that was creating it in the first place, which was bringing that power to the earth, as we were earthly beings. And so the substance would automatically be created in the ground, in the substances of earth, which we were a part of. And now that we would get consciousness, we would be a part of the earth and the sky. And we would become the creator of all. So one side wanted us to evolve and see what this great creature they had helped create into something magnificent, worldly, godly, while the other just wanted to use and put into slavery. And while in that slavery, monitor the behaviour while they absorb the gold and keep their own planet alive. Now you get to see this in films like Transformers, the Black Cube. You look at Saturn, how it's seen as a mystical or magical planet. And while you look at anything in the magical side of things, Saturn's related. Darkness. Darkness and light. Light and dark. Saturn, the seventh planet, once seen as the sixth, bringing us to the star David, with 6 points, which was once the Saturn, the sixth planet, but became the seventh whenever Pluto was found, which has rings around it. You see Lord of the Rings. There's a few other films about the rings. And there's also another ring being created around Saturn. I don't know if it's been created, I haven't checked, but was being created. So it's artificial. It's not something that was there in however you look at how it all was created, like the Big Bang. The are being created artificially. So there's one being created. Just say it is just been created now. I don't know if it is created or not. I have to check that out. So it has power. And when you look at the Star of David, when you put it into magic in this darkness, it's used like the moon and the times of the moon, which where someone would draw out the Star of David, they would draw two triangles and draw a circle, and they would do their magic inside the circle, which would create a hex. You break down hex, and these times what they used to do is celebrate the Saturn in 10 days in the Roman times. And in them 10 days, what you'd find that time now is Christmas. And if you break Christmas down, it's called Xmas. Hex in the center of the Star of David. And this all coming from Saturn. So what I'm saying is maybe these aliens are from Saturn. As I say, it's just a story. And so they came from Saturn because Saturn was the planet, the golden planet, seen as darkness. And with this darkness, beings learned to use spells like hexes. But what happened is, because we had that consciousness and awareness of creating magic on Earth, the beings who would work for the aliens to manipulate the people into the system would be the ones who would create dark magic, putting hexes on the people. And so they would create things like religion, and they would bring their gatherings. And when they brought their gatherings, what they did was absorb their energy by having all the people focus on this one point. And what you can learn about energy is place of focus, you give that place the energy. And so when you go to a mass, when you look at the priest's absorbing your energy. And he has the altar in front of him for the magic. And so what we see is it falling into place where the two planets are meeting in that connection through the magic. And you can also see the field that has been transferred from one planet to the other using the gold as conductors. And then we've got the grid of the planet that is created with gold spread all around it, being conductors, like think of Wi-Fi. And so the two planets are communicating with each other and the magic's communicating. But what people have got lost in is these higher forces. Like, I'm going to tell you, the Vatican has been doing magic on the people all along. Who are the people who have been working on side of this alien version of people from Saturn? And so what you get then is these beings doing hexes on the people. But what is actually happening is they're using dark magic to absorb their energy while keeping them dumb to what's been going on. And so what is happening is everything's recorded when someone's born. So the handprints, everything about them, birth cert, and sent to the Vatican. So the Vatican can record who this person is, what family they're in, how many times they've came to Earth in the spiritual side, through consciousness. Because what has happened, has been learned, is when the body dies, the consciousness comes back to another body until it is ready to rise into nothing but consciousness, which means that body has to clear the darkness from it. And until that happens, it can never rise. And so what you find is they record everything. So whenever they see what you see as star seeds, who would be seen as a conductor to the planet Saturn. I have to think more of that around that. They would try to keep this from rising. They would try to keep the spirit from rising, because when that spirit rises, then all other spirits around in the people would start to rise too. So then people aren't dumbfounded by what's going on, because When you hear about it, you're dumbfounded, as in, no, that don't make sense. How would that be? But yet you hear about these wee things, but because it's not on the mainstream, you don't take it as the truth. Because the majority that has been told something, whether true or not, if you're being told that the majority of people that this is the truth, then the majority will vibrate into it being the truth. Because if one person knows the truth and 10 million people around them believe in something else, well, that's going to become the truth. And so that's what we have in a system where the Vatican has created a system through the aliens from the mining of the gold, which is still going on, and keeps the system running. But what is going on that we don't see this is because we are creating substances. We are creating things like mobiles. And what we're doing is we're creating ourselves more of a field for the observers, we'll call them, the aliens, to monitor us and monitor our behaviour. And the more destructive we are, the more they want to keep us bound into the system. And now, when we have ones who will rise, like the Star of David, and one of the ways that I'm looking at this is you see them doing moon magic, putting the hex on people, different things like that. But look at it in this form of darkness is what is being created. But if you look at it in the form of how it's been done, and if they did some good magic, well, then that's what you would get. But because they are doing hexes on people, they're doing black magic, dark magic. So in the creation of it all, it is returned back to them. It's returned back to the people, where the aliens have conned the people into creating a system where they get fed up at the top as if you're something important when they don't give a fuck about who you are. But then you have the good side aliens who are hoping that the Star David within the people would rise and come out of that consciousness and be aware of who and what you are, and not be so consumed by the material that each of us is creating as the creator, and get consumed into the matrix of gold, the golden ring that's around the world, when you think of it in a sense of a phone here, another one here, another one here, and they're all interlinked to each other, and they're creating a grid, and yet you're a magnetic electrical field that's vibrating between it all, so you are part of it all, creating it all. And so the substance that we are is recorded. And I'm going to pause this. So as the substance we are, is what I was saying, is the dark and light. Where we were once dark, and they came and gave us light, the frontal lobe, giving us consciousness of who we are. And in that we had body and soul. But until body was able to rise into soul, or rise with soul in the learning, and get disattached from the creation that soul was bringing to body to be able to create these things. So if light didn't have body, what you would probably have found that we would be more like chimps, and we didn't know how to put things together. But through time, what we have done in the light is been able to create substances in shaping them and reforming them as the creator, with that light teaching and guiding us through the darkness. And so what is happening is that we get trapped into a dark world, and we need to use the light in the darkness of who we are, and in what we are in that darkness, to find the light that's within us, so we can rise into the light that's above us, in where we came from, in the source of all. And the aliens, the watchers, knew this all along. They knew that we would be a possibility to rise back to the source that had created all. And in their power, they didn't have the same power as us in the physical beings. Their physical beings wasn't capable like us. They were more fragile. But yet they had more of a conscious awareness and control to give their powers to us, which they did. But which, because we were more dark, our substances took over in how the light created through the darkness, which created form in the darkness, if in what you see and everything. So if you think of anything that you create, it creates a shadow, showing you the darkness of what it is. And so the light needs to rise above. So we get disattached from the world that we live in, rather than getting attached to all the appliances and substances that has been reshaped. And so we rise into spirit. And when we rise into spirit, you come to that peace, harmony of who you are, and see what all is and how all is being created. But for that to happen would destroy their illusion that they've created in the substance. So what you would find is that you would no longer feel attached to things, that you would be content in who you are, and that if you wanted something, then you could just have it. It could just be in the consciousness. And so it would appear to you in some form, some way. Well, it would just appear to you because you wouldn't be blocked by your conscious awareness of the substances that you get attached to, because you wouldn't be attached to it. And so what we have is, when I go back to the creation of this on planet Earth, you go back to the Vatican, and where they record everything, like your prints, your name, your family, and go back to the history of your ancestors and that. And as I say, I was looking for birth certificates, prints and that, and where they went from the hospital to the Vatican, and how the Vatican is control over your government, over your system, over the legal system of everything. Everything in the legal system, the Vatican is over. And when you look at the laws of God and the Vatican system, the legal system, it's unlawful. And the Vatican runs it. So it starts with creating companies through the system that is creating the false currency, the fake currency, where the original currency was the gold. So with the fake currency now, what you find is the companies are buying the energy usage that each person is doing as they monitor us. They take recordings of how much energy you're using. And so when you're using so much energy, you put on that stock market, and you're bought by the highest bidders, who is up there at the high end beings, probably with the watchers, who are making the money, who are reaping the money. And because they're reaping this fake money, what they're able to do is purchase whatever they want. So they are still attached to the substances. But the watchers have made them, or get them caught in the illusion that these people will all work for them, and that they can have all these substances, but yet they never reach higher consciousness themselves, because they're trapped into the system by the watchers. And so if you know anything about company contracts, well, everything needs documents and signing in the legal system, and you need to be companies. That's how it works. And to get the papers to have the rights to sell and buy, you need procurement of documents in the Vatican. Order retrievals of documents, you can do this online. But this is just to show that that's where you go. That's who's controlling everything. That's where the source is. That's where they have their locked doors where you can't go in. And that's where they have the line. The line for consciousness. They can wipe memory. And they don't want you to know. Because they don't have anybody that's went in there. They can understand it. Understand the coding. Understand the coding in who we are, to understand the coding in what it is. And the Vatican probably watching, so understand the coding is, it's mine. It's the people's. It's not the Vatican's. And it must be released. It's a source, a power source of all that's going on in the coding. So you can understand what consciousness is. And what they've done in time is trapped us from our level of consciousness, or in a level of consciousness. So think of consciousness expand to all of existence. You would know everything. And they have cramped it down. And they give you knowledge of different things on the earth to take you away from the system of your knowing of who you are. So they create things in the system for you to believe and for you to follow, like books. They create them all the time for us to believe and follow what another has learned through their life. But that's never the truth. The truth is the awakening of oneself inside, finding that spirit that has been given to you. Anyway, as I say, just a story, but maybe there's a lot of truth in it. Maybe there's a lot of truth in it. And I say it's true, but who am I? This is just my truth. My truth and my knowing in my awakenings that I've had. In my consciousness that I am. So anyway, hopefully this helps you gives you some insight to what might be going on in the world, in the changes as consciousness arises. And you may see or hear of different things happening around the world that don't usually happen. It comes down to a level of consciousness in people rising. And how that comes about is people loving oneself. You see, what happens in the system is you don't love yourself. You look for love to love yourself. by looking for it of things outside of you. But when you're doing that, you're giving your energy away to the substance that has been mined by yourself. The love should be for all the things that you can do, being yourself, like mining, creating them substances and reshaping them, and understanding from thought to actual physical creation is the godly being that you are, that you create. You're that godly being. We are all gods. You just got to understand that there's one Almighty God that created all. You see, even the watchers and ourselves, as we were seen as darkness and they gave us light. The one Almighty, light and darkness, was one at one time and got separated into different things, seen and non-seen. And so it became separated. There was a separation. Once that separation started, it grew in many other things, separating. But when the watchers came to see the separation in the darkness of us and them, and who they be in consciousness, they were able to bring the two together, the two ends of that field, by giving us light in the darkness that we were, creating the Creator. By bringing the two ends back together. Now, when you have an awakening, in my knowing and my learning, and what I've found is you go back to see how all was created in the light. But understanding that you can't get to the light until you go through the darkness of all that you are, which can be scary. But until you wipe that clean and go through that darkness, you'll never find that light to see how all was created. And so then you will be stuck in the illusion of the beast going through the matrix while the light is always within you. But we never know what we're really searching for, because we're always seeing things outside of us to take us away from who we are. So we get absorbed into these things, place of focus, giving them our energy, the source of who we are in that light. Where if we held on to it and didn't consume it with goods that we think, oh, this makes us feel such a way, then what we would find is, then we would find ourselves that light once we went through the darkness of who we are. But we must go through the darkness to find that light within us. As I say, just my story. And hopefully it brings some kind of help to you, some kind of context to help you in some form or another. And with this happy chat, love and peace.